Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time we're digging into something that's probably pretty close to you right now.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's in your pocket or on your desk, or maybe even tucked away in a drawer somewhere.
Right.
We're talking about sustainable electronics.
Mm-hmm.
Or, to put it another way, how do we deal with the ever-growing mountain of e-waste?
It's a big one.
Our guide for this deep dive is going to be a European research proposal called EECONE.
Okay.
And it's jam-packed with really cutting-edge ideas for making our gadgets
a
little less trashy.
Yeah, less trashy, definitely. And it's not just about recycling what we already have, you know?
Right.
EECONE is looking at the whole life cycle of electronics.
Oh, wow.
From design to disposal.
Oh, okay.
Trying to figure out how to make it more sustainable from start to finish.
Okay, so before we get into the solutions, right, let's paint a picture of the problem.
Sure.
The Global E-Waste Monitor from 2020, they reported a mind-blowing 53.6 million metric tons of e-waste generated in 2019. I mean, that's like if everyone on the planet threw out 7 kilos of old phones, laptops.
Yeah, gosh.
All in the same year.
Yeah.
So where does it all go, and why should we even care?
That's the scary part, right? A lot of it ends up in landfills, where those hazardous materials can leach into the environment.
Right.
Polluting soil and water.
And, we're also talking about valuable resources here.
Yeah.
Things like gold and copper just going to waste.
Right.
Not to mention the potential health risks for people who work in those informal e-waste processing sites.
Right. So it's kind of like we're sweeping the dust under the rug, except the rug is the planet and the dust is toxic.
Yeah, a rather grim analogy, but unfortunately it's pretty accurate.
Right.
And that's why EECONE's approach is so interesting. They're not looking for a bigger broom.
Right.
They want to redesign the whole system.
Okay, I like that. And that brings us to their 6R framework, right?
Yes.
Reduce reliability, repair, reuse, refurbish, and recycle.
It feels a little bit like a school mnemonic, but it's actually a pretty comprehensive roadmap for creating a circular economy for electronics.
I agree.
But hold on. Isn't recycle kind of the default solution we already have? How do the other R's actually change things?
Well, it's true that recycling is a crucial part of the solution.
Right.
But it's really the last resort in a circular economy.
Okay.
The other R's are all about keeping electronics in use for as long as possible, so you delay the moment they become waste.
So it's about making our gadgets last longer, fixing them when they break.
Yes.
And maybe even finding new uses for them when we're done.
Exactly. And that requires a shift in thinking, not just for consumers, but also for the companies that design and manufacture those electronics.
Got it. And EECONE isn't all talk. They actually showcase some pretty cool technologies that are already being developed.
Oh, yeah.
I was reading about SACETech's work on SmartSiC.
I've heard of that.
It's a new type of substrate for power electronic components.
Okay.
And apparently it can make those components up to 20% smaller. That sounds pretty impressive. But what does that actually mean in terms of reducing e-waste?
Well, it's a great example of how design choices can have a big impact.
Okay.
Smaller components mean fewer raw materials, less energy consumed during manufacturing, and ultimately less waste in those landfills.
Okay.
Plus, the way SmartSiC is manufactured, it allows for a really innovative recycling process.
Wait, you're telling me they can actually recycle parts of these components and use them again?
Yeah.
What's the catch?
No catch, exactly. But it's not as simple as tossing your old phone in the recycling bin.
Right.
They use a technique that allows the donor wafers, so that's the base material, to be reused up to 30 times.
30 times. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine the impact if we could apply that kind of thinking to all electronics manufacturing.
Right. It would be huge. That's precisely the kind of systemic change that EECONE is aiming for.
Wow.
It's not just about one technology or company. It's about creating a whole ecosystem for sustainable electronics.
I like that. And it sounds like modularity is a big part of that vision.
Oh, definitely.
I was reading about EECONE's focus on modular power electronics.
Right.
Where those systems are designed to be easily taken apart and upgraded. So instead of chucking the whole thing when one part breaks, you just swap out the faulty module.
Exactly.
It's like building with Legos, but for grown-ups.
That's a great analogy. Modularity really has the potential to significantly extend the lifespan of electronics.
Right.
Make them much easier to repair and upgrade.
Okay.
And when it is time to finally retire a device, those modules can be easily separated and recycled.
Gotcha.
Which maximizes material recovery.
So it's not just about making things smaller, it's about designing them smarter from the get-go.
Exactly. It's about shifting the design philosophy from disposability to longevity.
I like that. Speaking of design, I was intrigued by EECONE's research into metallic conductive inks,
Okay.
specifically ones that use copper. Now, I know next to nothing about inks, but apparently they're a big deal in printed electronics. Why is copper ink suddenly the star of the show?
Well, it's all about finding more sustainable alternatives. For a long time, silver has been the go-to material.
Right.
But silver is expensive, and mining it can be environmentally damaging.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Copper, on the other hand, is more abundant and has a lower environmental impact.
So it's like finding a budget-friendly, eco-conscious swap for a fancy ingredient.
Yes.
Like choosing tap water over bottled water, but for electronics.
Exactly.
So hold on. Is copper ink as good as silver? Are there any downsides?
That's a great question, and it's something researchers are still working on. Copper inks don't conduct electricity quite as well.
Okay.
At least not yet. But research is moving fast, and there's a lot of potential for improvement.
Okay.
Plus, the sustainability benefits of copper make it a very attractive alternative.
So we're talking about a trade-off, slightly lower performance for a much smaller environmental footprint.
Right.
That seems like a pretty reasonable compromise, especially if the technology keeps improving.
Exactly. And this is where EECONE's holistic approach comes in.
Okay.
They're not just looking at individual technologies in isolation.
Right.
They're considering the entire system and trying to find solutions that balance performance, cost, and sustainability.
And one of the ways they demonstrate this is through a really cool use case, the development of a green soil probe for agriculture.
Yes. The green soil probe is a fantastic example of how EECONE's principles can be applied in a real-world setting.
So cool.
It incorporates several key innovations, like eco-friendly batteries and sustainable materials.
And they're even looking at battery-free alternatives like solar cells, right?
Yes.
So you could have a soil probe that's powered entirely by the sun. That's pretty amazing.
It is, and it shows how innovative design can lead to more sustainable and efficient solutions.
Okay.
The green soil probe is just one example, but it highlights the potential for applying these principles across a variety of industries.
So we've got these cool new technologies and sustainable materials, but what about the mountains of e-waste that are already out there?
Right.
What about all the perfectly good gadgets that people are just tossing because they're out of fashion or slightly outdated?
Yeah.
It feels a bit like we're building a fancy new house while the old one is still on fire.
That's a very vivid image. And you're right, EECONE is very aware of this challenge. They're not just focused on future innovation, they're also exploring ways to extend the life of existing devices.
I like that.
One of the ideas they're exploring is repurposing old smartphones.
Repurposing smartphones. Like turning them into paperweights or something.
More useful than that, they're looking at adding low-impact USB modules to turn them into customer premises equipment, or CPE.
Okay, full disclosure, I have no idea what CPE is.
Sure.
But it sounds important. Can you break it down for me?
CPE is basically the equipment that connects your home or office to the internet.
Okay.
Think of it like the modem and router combined. So instead of throwing away your old smartphone, you could actually turn it into a piece of essential network equipment.
That's a wild idea.
Yeah.
It's like giving your old phone a second life of promotion even.
Exactly. And it's a perfect example of how we can find creative ways to reduce e-waste by extending the lifespan of existing devices.
Okay, so we've got all these amazing innovations, but how do we actually get them out of the lab and into the real world?
That's where EECONE's focus on eco-design comes in. They advocate for using tools like Dassault Systèmes' 3D Experience platform, which allows designers to virtually create and test products before they're even built.
So it's like a virtual playground for sustainable design. Can you explain how it works?
It's a powerful software suite that lets designers create virtual twins of their products and simulate their performance under various conditions.
Cool.
They can test different materials, try out different design choices, even simulate the entire life cycle of a product.
Oh, wow.
See how it will degrade over time and how easily it can be recycled.
So they can virtually drop a phone hundreds of times to see how durable it is, or virtually disassemble it to see how easy it is to repair or recycle.
Precisely. And they can do all of this before any physical prototypes are even built.
Wow.
This means they can identify potential environmental issues early on and make design changes that minimize the product's impact.
So it's like having a crystal ball that shows you the environmental consequences of your design choices.
Yes.
That's pretty impressive.
Right.
But is it really enough to change the way the entire electronics industry operates?
It's certainly a powerful tool and a big step in the right direction.
Okay.
But as we've seen, there's no single solution to the e-waste problem.
Right.
It requires a multi-pronged approach.
And speaking of multi-pronged approaches,
Ew, no.
they're very upfront about the barriers to achieving a truly circular economy for electronics.
Yes, they are.
They acknowledge issues like the lack of adequate waste infrastructure in many parts of the world.
Right.
The difficulty of recovering valuable materials from those complex devices, and even consumer behavior that often prioritizes the latest and greatest gadgets over sustainability.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It sounds like they're trying to change the entire system and not just individual parts of it.
Exactly. And that requires a shift in mindset.
Right.
Not just for consumers, but also for policymakers, manufacturers, and recyclers.
Got it.
EECONE is working to build a strong ecosystem for sustainable electronics, one that brings all these stakeholders together to create a more circular future.
A pretty ambitious goal, but it feels like we're at a tipping point.
I think so too.
There's a growing awareness of the e-waste problem and a growing demand for more sustainable solutions. And it's not just a European thing, right?
It's global.
This movement is happening all over the world.
That's right. The European Green Deal, which sets ambitious sustainability targets for the EU, is certainly pushing things forward. But many countries around the world are adopting policies and regulations to encourage responsible electronics manufacturing and recycling.
So it's like a global wave of change.
Yeah.
And EECONE is riding the crest. Okay, this has been super insightful, but I have to ask. What does this all mean for someone like me, a regular person who just uses electronics every day?
Yeah.
I recycle my old gadgets, but is that enough?
That's a fantastic question, and one that EECONE is actively trying to answer.
Okay.
They believe that informed consumers are key to driving change in the electronics industry.
So it's not just about buying the latest gadgets. It's about being more conscious about the choices we make as consumers.
Exactly. And there are a lot of things you can do to make a difference.
Okay, hit me with your best tips. How can I become a more responsible consumer in the digital age?
One of the most impactful things you can do is simply buy fewer electronics.
Okay.
Do you really need to upgrade your phone every year? Could you hold on to it for a bit longer?
Ouch, that one hits close to home.
But seriously, think about the lifespan of your devices. Could you repair them instead of replacing them?
Okay.
Could you buy refurbished electronics? These are all simple choices that can have a big impact.
Okay, I'm taking notes. What else can I do?
Do your research before you buy. Find out which companies have strong sustainability policies.
Yeah.
Support businesses that are making an effort to reduce their environmental impact.
Got it.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. The more we talk about e-waste, the more pressure we put on companies to change their practices.
So it's about voting with our wallets and our voices.
Exactly. Consumers have a lot of power, and we can use that power to drive change.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I have a much better understanding of the challenges and opportunities in the world of sustainable electronics. But we've only just scratched the surface, haven't we?
That's right. There's so much more to explore.
We'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive into sustainable electronics, exploring even more fascinating ideas and solutions from the EECONE project. Stay tuned.
And speaking of exploring, one area where EECONE is doing some really groundbreaking work is in the field of printed electronics.
Okay, you've mentioned this term a few times now, printed electronics.
Yeah.
You're going to have to break that down for me because, honestly, the only printing I do these days is hitting Stroll plus P.
Well, get ready to have your mind blown because printed electronics is essentially what it sounds like. You're printing electronic circuits.
Okay.
Directly onto surfaces, like paper or plastic, using these specialized inks.
So instead of those rigid circuit boards we're used to,
right,
you're saying we could have flexible circuits printed on almost anything.
You got it. And it's a game changer because it uses way fewer resources than traditional electronics manufacturing.
Okay.
Which involves things like etching those circuits onto silicon wafers.
Right.
It's like trading in a sledgehammer for a scalpel.
Okay.
Much more precise and way less wasteful.
So less waste, more flexibility.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see why EECONE is excited about this.
Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier that copper inks are a big focus in printed electronics.
Right.
Is there a reason they're choosing copper over other materials?
It all comes back to those eco-conscious swaps we were talking about. Traditionally, silver has been the star player in conductive inks.
Okay.
Because it's an excellent conductor. But silver is a precious metal.
Right.
Which means it's not only expensive,
yeah,
But it also comes with a pretty hefty environmental cost to mine and process.
That makes sense.
Copper, though, not quite as conductive as silver, is much more abundant and has a much lighter environmental footprint.
So copper inks might not be the gold standard, but they're definitely vying for the green standard. Right?
Exactly.
But you said not quite as conductive. Does that mean our printed electronics will be slower or less powerful?
That's a great question, and honestly, it's something researchers are still working on. Improving the conductivity of those copper inks.
Okay.
That's a big area of research right now, and they're making great strides. It's like fine-tuning a recipe.
Okay.
You're finding the perfect balance of ingredients and techniques to get the best results.
So it's like those early solar panels.
Yeah.
They weren't as efficient as fossil fuels at first,
Right.
but the technology kept improving, and look where we are now.
Exactly.
But it's not just about the materials.
Right.
No, you mentioned that EECONE is looking at the entire manufacturing process for printed electronics.
Exactly. Remember, it's all about that holistic approach.
Right.
EECONE researchers are looking at everything from the inks and solvents used in the printing process to how those printed circuits are integrated into devices.
Gotcha.
And they're exploring bio-based and non-toxic alternatives for every step of the way.
So it's like they're creating a recipe for truly sustainable printed electronics, from ingredients to cooking methods.
A very apt analogy. And it's this meticulous attention to detail that makes EECONE's work so impactful.
All right, so printed electronics is definitely on my radar now. What other cool tech is EECONE focusing on?
Well, we've touched on it before, but it's worth diving a little deeper into SmartSiC.
Okay.
That new substrate for power electronic components. Remember, it can reduce component size by 20%, which means less raw materials, less energy consumption during manufacturing, and ultimately less waste.
Right. And you mentioned that the donor wafers used in SmartSiC's production can be reused up to 30 times.
Yes.
Which is mind-blowing. But I'm curious about the how behind that. What kind of recycling wizardry are they using to pull that off?
They're using a process called chemical mechanical planarization.
Okay.
Or CMP for short. It's a bit technical.
Yeah.
But essentially, they polish off the used layer of the wafer, leaving a pristine surface that can then be used to create new components.
So it's like giving the wafer a spa treatment, exfoliating away the old to make way for the new.
It's a very sophisticated process and a testament to the ingenuity of the researchers involved.
Okay, I'm officially adding CMP to my list of cool things I didn't know existed.
It's a good one.
But it seems like a pretty high-tech solution. Is this kind of recycling process scalable? Can we really apply it to all electronics manufacturing?
That's a question that researchers are still grappling with. Scaling up any new technology comes with challenges, and CMP is no exception. But the potential benefits are huge, so there's a lot of motivation to find solutions.
Well, if they can figure it out, it could be a total game changer for the way we think about recycling electronics. It would be amazing to move away from this linear take, make, dispose model to something that's truly circular.
And that's exactly what EECONE is striving for.
Yeah.
They're challenging the status quo and showing that a more sustainable future for electronics is possible.
But it's not just about the technology itself.
Right.
It's also about changing the way we design products from the very beginning.
You hit the nail on the head. EECONE places a huge emphasis on eco-design.
Okay.
Which means considering the environmental impact of a product throughout its entire life cycle.
Right.
From the materials used to how it's manufactured, used, and eventually disposed of.
So it's not just about making things recyclable. It's about designing them to last longer, be easier to repair, and maybe even have a second life after their initial purpose is fulfilled.
Precisely. It's about shifting the design philosophy from disposability to longevity. And one of the ways EECONE is promoting this shift is by advocating for tools like the 3D Experience platform we talked about earlier.
Right, the virtual playground for sustainable design.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think that designers can now test the durability, repairability, and recyclability of their products before they even build a physical prototype.
It is.
But how do they actually measure these things in a virtual environment?
It's all about simulation. The 3D Experience platform uses these sophisticated algorithms to model the behavior of materials and components under various conditions.
Okay.
For example, designers can simulate how a product will react to different temperatures, how it will wear down over time, and how it will break apart when it's time to recycle it.
So they can virtually stress test a product to see where its weak points are, both in terms of durability and recyclability.
Exactly. And this allows them to make design changes early on before any physical prototypes are built, which can save a lot of time, money, and resources.
It's like having a sneak peek into the future of a product seeing how it will age and eventually meet its end. But even with these amazing tools, there's still challenges, right?
Of course.
I mean, changing the entire system of how we design and manufacture electronics is a pretty massive undertaking.
You're absolutely right. There are still hurdles to overcome, like the cost of implementing new technologies and the need for collaboration across the entire electronics supply chain.
And let's be honest, we the consumers also need to change our habits.
Right, absolutely.
We're often so quick to jump on the latest gadget, even if the one we have is still perfectly functional.
Absolutely. Consumer behavior plays a huge role in driving that demand for new electronics.
Right.
If we're constantly chasing the next shiny object, it puts pressure on manufacturers to produce new products at a rapid pace. Which can lead to shortcuts in design and manufacturing that ultimately have negative environmental consequences.
So it's like a vicious cycle. Our desire for the newest and best fuels a system that generates a lot of waste. But it sounds like EECONE is trying to break that cycle by promoting a more circular model.
Yes.
Where products are designed to last longer and be reused or repurposed at the end of their life.
Exactly. And it's not just about environmental benefit. It's also about economic opportunities.
Okay.
A circular economy for electronics has the potential to create new jobs, stimulate innovation, and make Europe more competitive in the global electronics market.
So it's a win-win for the planet and the economy. That's the message I can get behind.
It is.
But how do we actually make this happen? It feels like such a big, complex problem. Where do we even begin?
Well, EECONE is a great example of how collaboration can lead to real progress.
Okay.
They've brought together experts from across the electronics industry, manufacturers, researchers, recyclers, policymakers, to work towards this common goal.
So it's like a brain trust for sustainable electronics, pooling their knowledge and resources to find solutions.
Precisely. And they're not just talking about the problem. Right. They're developing concrete solutions and testing them in real-world settings.
Okay, that's inspiring.
Yeah.
But what about us regular folks? How can we contribute to this movement towards a more sustainable future for electronics?
You might be surprised by how much power you have as a consumer.
Okay.
Think about the choices you make every day. Could you repair your broken gadgets instead of throwing them away? Could you buy refurbished electronics instead of new ones?
So it's about being more mindful about our consumption habits and supporting businesses that are committed to sustainability.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of your voice. Talk to your friends and family about e-waste. Spread the word about the importance of eco-design. The more awareness we create, the more pressure we put on companies and policymakers to make changes.
Well, I'm definitely feeling inspired to step up my sustainable electronics game. And speaking of stepping up, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back to continue our deep dive into the world of sustainable electronics. Stay tuned. All right, we're back. And you know, one thing that's really struck me throughout this whole deep dive is just how complex this issue is.
Yeah, it really is.
It's not just about finding better ways to recycle.
Right.
It's about rethinking the entire life cycle of electronics, like you said, from design to disposal.
You're absolutely right. It's a multifaceted challenge, and it requires that systemic approach. And one of the things that makes the EECONE project so unique is its emphasis on collaboration.
Okay, so we've talked about collaboration before, but I'm curious to hear more about what that actually looks like in practice.
Yeah.
Who are the key players, and how are they working together to make a difference?
Well, EECONE has assembled a truly impressive consortium of partners bringing together some of the biggest names in the electronics industry.
Oh, wow.
We're talking about companies like ST Microelectronics,
Okay.
Infineon research institutions like CEA,
Right. And even innovative small and medium-sized enterprises, specializing in everything from printed electronics to battery recycling.
Wow, that's a pretty diverse group. It's like the Avengers of sustainable electronics, each bringing their own unique superpowers to the table. But how do they actually work together? Are they all in the same lab brainstorming ideas over coffee?
Not quite that simple, but the spirit of collaboration is definitely there.
Okay.
They have these regular meetings, workshops, and conferences where they share their research, discuss challenges, and come up with joint solutions.
So it's like a constant exchange of ideas and information, a hive mind for sustainable electronics innovation.
You could say that.
But it's not just about the experts, right? EECONE is also engaging with policymakers, industry associations, and even the general public to raise awareness and advocate for change.
Exactly. They recognize that achieving a circular economy for electronics requires buy-in from all stakeholders.
Right.
So they're working to influence policy, shape industry standards, and empower consumers to make more sustainable choices. Okay, so it's a multi-pronged approach, tackling the issue from every angle.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about impact. What are some of the concrete outcomes that EECONE is hoping to achieve? What's their vision for the future?
They've set some ambitious goals. For example, they aim to develop new recycling technologies that can recover valuable materials from e-waste more efficiently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Reduce the environmental impact of printed electronics manufacturing by using sustainable materials and processes.
Mm.
And create a collaborative platform that empowers designers to incorporate eco-design principles from the very beginning of that product development process.
So it's not just about tweaking the current system. It's about fundamentally transforming the way we design, manufacture, use, and recycle electronics.
You got it. They're looking at the big picture.
Right.
Trying to create a system that's not only environmentally sustainable, but also economically viable.
Now, that's something I think everyone can get behind.
I agree.
It's not about sacrificing progress. It's about finding smarter, more sustainable ways to innovate.
Exactly. And EECONE is demonstrating that sustainability and profitability can go hand in hand.
Right.
By investing in eco-design, resource efficiency, and closed-loop recycling companies can not only reduce their environmental impact, but also unlock new economic opportunities.
So it's not just a feel-good initiative. It's a smart business strategy.
Absolutely. And as consumers become more aware of the environmental and social costs of electronics, they're increasingly demanding those sustainable products.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Companies that ignore this trend risk being left behind.
Well, I'm definitely feeling more optimistic about the future of electronics after learning about EECONE and all the amazing work they're doing.
Me too.
It's inspiring to see so many brilliant minds coming together to tackle this challenge head on.
It's a testament to human ingenuity and the power of collaboration,
Yeah.
and a reminder that even seemingly intractable problems can be solved when we work together towards a common goal.
Well said. This deep dive has been incredibly insightful, and I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us. But before we wrap up, I have one final question. We've talked a lot about what companies and policymakers can do, but what about us regular folks? What's one simple thing we can all do to make a difference?
Here's a challenge for all our listeners. Next time you're about to upgrade your phone, laptop, or any other gadget, just pause for a moment and ask yourself, do I really need this? Could I repair my current device instead? Could I buy a refurbished model? These small choices can have a ripple effect, reducing demand for those new products and encouraging companies to prioritize sustainability.
I love that. It's a simple action, but it can have a powerful impact. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a more sustainable future.
Absolutely. And the more people who join the movement, the faster we can make progress.
This has been an amazing deep dive into the world of sustainable electronics. We've covered a lot of ground, from the challenges of e-waste to the innovative solutions being developed by EECONE and others. And it's clear that the future of electronics is not just about technological advancement. It's about finding ways to make those advancements sustainable and equitable.
It's a journey we're all on together.
To all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've learned something new, felt inspired, and are ready to make a difference. Be sure to check out the EECONE Project website for even more information and resources. Until next time, keep diving deep.